Good evening, everyone. I have 7 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order and ask the city clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Jeff Elshoff.
Here.
Dr. Joel Schroeder.
Here.
Mr. Justin Smith.
Here.
Mr. John Welch.
Present.
And Miss Diane Nguyen.
Here.
And you have a quorum, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you. This evening, we have Pastor Gary Green from the Gospel Assembly Church in Bel Aire to lead us in prayer. Pastor Green.
Thank you for having us. All those that would, please join me in bowed heads as we pray. Heavenly Father, giver of life and great creator, giver of all good things, we acknowledge you as our sovereign God. We acknowledge and thank you for your Son, Jesus, and the hope of everlasting life. At this night, before this meeting, Father, we also acknowledge the world is changing rapidly. We acknowledge the fact that we need your guidance. So I pray tonight you guide the steps of our honorable mayor and these councilmen. And before this meeting tonight, I just ask you to, on their behalf of our mayor and council members, if there anybody is sad, that you would mend it. If anybody is brokenhearted, you would heal it. If they or their loved ones are sick, would you please bless their family members with healing? Pray, God, that you'll lift the burdens and guide their steps in this meeting tonight. The best thing you could do for our Bel Aire community is to bless these people and sitting in these high seats tonight. You chose them, you placed them there. So we ask that your wisdom will be theirs. Your compassion and love for one another will be theirs. They work together in harmony and unity for the betterment of this community, God. We know their burdens are many and it isn't easy. So you sustain them and you lift them up. We ask once again, humbly, Lord, this virus that's fallen our land, that you will remove it. In the meantime, would your grace overshadow this community? Keep us safe. Not only their people here, but our police officers, our first responders. Their role is so important now more than ever before. We need you, God. We acknowledge the fact that we need you. And we pray you'll ease their burden, that you'll give them wisdom and guidance for the betterment of our community. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
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 Thank you. Please join me in leading in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Move on to determine agenda additions. Are there any agenda additions to consider? Hearing none, I'll move on to the consent agenda. It only contains the minutes of the September 9th, 2021 council meeting. Any discussion or motion on the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Welch. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item 7, discussion and approval of appropriation ordinance. This reporting period is more typical. Bonded project expenses total $43,816. Invoices for road repairs, which are being covered by capital project funds, are amount to $24,647. Any discussion or motion on the appropriations agenda? Ordinance.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
I'll make a motion to approve appropriations ordinance 21-17.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Dr. Schroeder. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Move on to city requested appearances. The city is required by state statutes to complete a financial audit each year. Allen Gibbs and Hewlett is the company we contract with for the service. Tara Laughlin is here to present the 2020 City of Bel Aire financial audit. Ms. Laughlin.
Good evening. I'm Tara Laughlin. I'm here with AGH. Sorry, I can't speak very loud. I was sick a few weeks ago and have this lingering cough. Not COVID. Tested negative. But I'm Tara Laughlin with AGH, here to present the city's fiscal year 20 financial statement audit. Our services that we provide the audit is to issue an opinion on the financial statements. We did issue an unmodified or clean opinion, so it's the highest level of opinion that can be achieved, which means that the financial statements materially reflect the books and records of the city's activity for fiscal year 2020. Before I get into required communications that the audit standards want us to go over every year, I just want to thank Ted and all of his staff that help us throughout the audit. It's additional work on top of their day-to-day operations that they have to take care of. So just want to thank them for all of their help and cooperation throughout the audit process. I am going to go over a letter that was provided to the council. I'm just going to highlight on the things specifically related to this year's audit. Towards the bottom of the first page, it talks about any adoptions of new accounting standards or policies, and there were no new accounting standards required to be implemented by the city this year. So when you're looking at this year's financial statements compared to last year's, there was no accounting changes that were required. So changes in numbers would just be changes in activity from one year to another. Moving on to the second page. Not all numbers within the financial statements are hard no numbers. There are some estimation processes involved with all financial statements. We outline in the letter the estimates that we have determined are significant accounting estimates. These are the same as last year, and they relate to the valuation of land, and then the net pension liability, which is the city's share of the Capers state pension liability, and the total other post-employment benefit liability, which is also the city's share of the Capers death and disability program as well. So with accounting estimates, we obtain an understanding of how management determines those estimates. We review the inputs and outputs and calculations that result in the estimate for reasonableness. In all cases, we did find that those estimates were being done reasonably. Next item to go over is audit adjustments. As many of you are familiar, the city keeps their books and records during the year on a budget basis to comply with state statutes. But the financial statements are presented under generally accepted accounting principles, which requires year-end entries to go from the budget basis to the GAAP basis. During the audit process, we take care of most of those audit adjustments. The city provides us all the support, but we kind of compile and actually do all the audit adjustments to get from the budget basis to the GAAP basis. So listed there primarily are the same types of audit adjustments we have every year, and it primarily results in just doing these year-end only adjustments for the city. Like I said, the city keeps their books to comply with budget standards and statutes of the state. Uncorrected misstatements, I always like to define this. These are items that might come up during the audit process that are not necessarily reflected in the books and records because it was determined by management to not materially impact users of the financial statements. And through all of our standards and our guidelines, we agree that it wouldn't materially affect users of those financial statements. This year we had one item, and it really was just a timing issue related to some land sales. There's about $50,000 that was recorded in one year that should have been recorded in another year. So it's all reflected now. It's just a timing issue between years. So that's the only uncorrected misstatement that we had. Moving on to page 3, I always like to highlight in other disclosures. We had no disagreements with management during the audit process. Again, Ted and his team was very helpful throughout the audit process, answered our questions timely, provided the support we asked for timely as well. Similar to prior years, we do have some internal control matters outlined in the letter. The bottom of page 3, this relates to those GAAP adjustments that I've already talked about. So since we do a lot of those year-end adjustments for GAAP purposes only, that does trigger an internal control deficiency related to financial reporting. This is the same type of issue that we've had in prior years as well. And again, it just relates to how the city keeps their books and records during the year. On to page 4, also discusses some internal control items related to segregation of duties, which is not uncommon for cities with smaller staff sizes like the city of Bel Aire to have some segregation of duties issues. We like to point those out every year just so the council is aware of them. And the city is working on adding some additional mitigating controls in these areas. So that's kind of an in process to help further mitigate the risks. But we do like to disclose those every year in the letter. Again, nothing new from prior years. So those of you who have been on the council, all very similar issues. And again, not uncommon for a city of this size. Towards the end of the letter, we just have some general matters that we disclose to all of our clients, whether they're government, not-for-profit, or for-profit entities, of just general risks that are out there in the environment today. The biggest one being information security governance, especially in the COVID remote working world. We just like to provide that information to the council every year, just so you are aware of those risks related to information security governance. So in the end, overall, very similar audit as in prior years, issued an unmodified opinion. We did all the kind of similar adjustments that we typically do every year for the city. Any questions from the council?
I'd just like to say thank you for the work that you've done. And I also wanted to point out that Ms. Laughlin, Mr. Henry and I did meet in March to put together a plan to address some of these deficiencies. And hopefully next year they will be fully addressed and we won't see them year after year. As an auditor myself, I don't do financial audits, but I do quality system audits. And I don't like seeing deficiencies, although we have to write them as well. So I appreciate the work and hopefully we can get those addressed. So thank you.
Thank you.
Just before we stop, I do want to mention sometimes we use the word staff a lot, but really I should just say Deb and Ted is kind of the financial staff. So I know big organization, when you say staff, you think 10 or 20 people. And really that's what we've seen since 2014. Some of these things is, you don't have a 10-person staff to do everything. So a lot of it, the big issue that came up is our financial software is now allowing kind of a read-only program. So one of the big problems is I have complete control over all the modules and our auditors don't care for that too much. So right now I'm on read-only on several of our modules. So we're going to see if that works. But other than that, really the pretty clean audit. And we'll continue to work with everyone involved to get some of these off. So I do just want to mention and thank Deb. Deb Appel is our city treasurer, and she's done probably, I guess I counted it today, about 5,038 payments last year, and then over 235 journal entries that we did. So a lot of work gets done for this document here, and I want to thank publicly my city treasurer for helping me out.
Very good. Thank you. Any other discussion concerning our financial audits from 2020?
I think people that have been around a while, these internal control matters, I think I asked a bunch of questions about it last year. Someone probably asked a bunch of questions the year before about that. So a lot of us are familiar with those and kind of gone in those. So if anyone's watching and wondering why maybe we're not asking more questions, obviously the mayor is addressing it and going to try to get them fully done. But we've talked about it at length at other times, which is why kind of this year I don't have any questions about it because they were answered last year.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll move on to citizens' concerns. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address the council? Hearing none, we'll move on to council member reports. So, Dr. Schroeder, would you like to give a report?
I have no report.
Mr. Elsop,
I have no report, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith,
I also have no report.
Mr. Welch,
I have no report.
Ms. Lynn.
Must have been a slow day in Bel Aire because I have no report either.
All right. Well, I have a short one, so but I will give mine. So on September 9th, I did attend the KDOT consult, which it turned out to be only available in Zoom. So it was all remote. None of us could be in person. So we didn't really know how this was going to work. So Mr. Laster put together a really nice presentation. Unfortunately, we were not able to give that presentation. I did send what I could to the to KDOT, and I advocated for the interchange at K254 in Webb, as well as the interchange at K254 in Ohio. Both of those interchanges are now priorities for KDOT based upon the input of myself and others. I did tell KDOT I believe that they underrated the economic impact benefit of the interchange at Webb. Bel Aire has had multiple potential commercial business pass on Bel Aire due to the concerns with K254 access. KDOT will be reviewing the economic impact for a higher level of need. And they did rate the engineering safety at 29, and the highest any project has been rated for safety is 30. So they at least have the engineering safety issue appropriately scored. The higher the score, the more safety issue that it is. So, okay. On September 14th, I attended the WAMPO meeting. We had previously stated Bel Aire made an application for some COVID funds made available to WAMPO, which is, there's a little bit of quirky thing there because most COVID funds are not available for roads. So, but the project selection committee will meet on this Friday, the 24th, and they will make their recommendations to the TAC, Technical Advisory Committee. The Technical Advisory Committee will meet on Monday, the 27th. So from there, their recommendations, if approved at that point, will be passed on to the TPB, which is the board that I sit on for consideration. And I think that's going to be October 12th, but I'm not clear on that date. So I don't know if it'll be the 12th or a later date that we will consider those. But the TBD will approve those projects at that point. So we'll know, hopefully we'll know something Friday, and hopefully we keep going through, pass through all the gates and get a project going. So, I also heard a presentation from the city of Wichita, or we did, not just myself. This is similar to presentations we have been hearing from other cities in Sedgwick County, including Bel Aire. Lastly, a presentation was made concerning a program called Vision Zero. The concept here is to look at ways we can reduce traffic accidents and deaths by utilizing different concepts in road design. Some of these concepts may have merit in some applications. So it's a good idea to review the road designs, but the program seems to veer off its target in that it discusses using data to focus on race, ethnicity, level of poverty, and household median income. This is troubling in that none of these seem to have any relevance to traffic safety. No action was suggested to be taken at this meeting, so I did send a note to the chairman and the director expressing concerns that these could be windows to instill racism or sexism or some other types of discrimination into road policy, something I hope everyone opposes. The focus needs to be on traffic safety. And then lastly, Kansas website has gone backward on the percentage of those vaccinated against COVID. They are now reporting 51%. A couple weeks ago, that's 52. I don't know no explanation of why that changed that I could find anyway for the lower number. Sedgwick County has been reporting infection rates at between 9 and 7% since August 6th. It's just kind of teetering right around there. Yesterday, it was 8.49%. So we're just staying kind of flat right there at that level. So not going higher, but not improving either. So please continue to be safe, wash hands, practice 6-foot social distancing, wear a mask if not vaccinated, and continue to support each other. And at that, I'll ask our city attorney for her report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, we are 42 days away from the election, and so political signs can now go into the public right away. So you may see signs, and I just wanted to remind the public that political signs are signs specifically designed to support a candidate. That's the legal definition of them. A candidate for public office or measures on an election ballot. Under state laws, signs can go up without any restrictions on private property or the unpaved right-of-way 45 days before the election. So, as of 3 days ago, signs may be placed in most HOA neighborhoods, even with even with HOA restrictions, and you might want to talk to your HOA about that, and in public right-of-ways as long as they don't create a safety hazard. Those signs should be no more than 4 feet high and 8 square feet and may have writing on both sides. Campaign signs may be placed on city streets as well, in the right-of-way along city streets, and they may be placed on private property with the owner's permission. That's a caveat we sometimes get calls about. And signs may be placed throughout the city now until 2 days after the election. If there's a runoff, that sign can remain past that period. But shortly after the election, Public Works will go through and pick up any signs in city right-of-way property. So that's the notice on signs. Just was working with the clerk and was able to do an update on where we are on records requests this year. You might remember last year we were a little concerned about the type of video records and time-intensive records we were getting. This year it seems a little more balanced. So far we've had 30 records this year. Most of them were for building permit signs and understanding that to be a homeowner wanting to know what plumber worked on their whatever system at home, or backflow or fence. So those are pretty quickly processed. We have had a few more that are more time intensive. The most being a 17-hour request. That was a pretty time consuming project. And we anticipate one that based on a clarification request, we may have another one that's upwards of 17 or more hours. But so far the 30 requests we've received have been pretty even keel. Lastly, I was not at the last workshop, but I'm working with the city manager to follow up on the ballot question. Been in contact with the county, and they are pretty much firm on the fact that publication process has started. They're not able to add anything to the ballot. We are teaming up on requesting the Secretary of State ask the Attorney General to provide an updated opinion. However, the Attorney General's opinions are not being cranked out very often this year. There's a lot going on. So we were talking in between the county attorney and myself, we don't see, even if the Secretary of State requests an opinion, that opinion may not come out till sometime in 2022. So, but right now I do, obviously support and like the idea of the town hall format. So working with the city manager on that. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Move on to the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to mention that this Saturday, the Villas at Prestwick is having an open house and grand opening for the new clubhouse. And that will be from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. You may remember I mentioned this a few months ago, and it was canceled. One was COVID, and two was it didn't get finished because there's been a shortage of lumber and such, if you've not heard that. So they actually did get it finished finally, and they're going to hold it this Saturday. And the Villas at Prestwick is just right across City Hall up here. And they're already working on phase 2 of that. So that's what all the construction work. And I talked to the developer this week, and he might be interested in a phase 3, which would take some more land. So we'll be talking with him about that. And then the last thing I wanted to piggyback onto was Jackie had mentioned the election coming up. There will be 2 candidate forums that are scheduled. One is October 13th at 6 p.m. And that's the Bel Aire Senior Club is hosting that, and that'll be at the Rec Center. It might be I just heard that they were having it, but I didn't hear the time. We'll get some information out about the exact time. 7 o'clock. Okay, so it's 7 p.m. And then the Bel Aire Chamber will be hosting a candidate forum here at City Hall in the community room on October 21st. So opportunity for citizens to get to know those running for offices. So that's all I had, Mayor. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Move on to item 9A, consideration approving KDOT work estimate. So since Woodlawn expansion is utilizing state dollars, construction engineering services are required and must be contracted through a specific selection process. In 2020, the city selected Garver for construction engineering services from KDOT's list of pre-qualified contractors. The city engineer was provided estimates from Garver and KDOT on hours needed for the various services required for the project. The city engineer negotiated the hours with Garver, and Garver submitted an agreed upon hours to KDOT. Now, work estimate form must be submitted to KDOT, which sets the not to exceed hourly cost plus fixed fee contract in the amount of $873,896.61. The cost associated with these services will be shared 80% by WAMPO and 20% paid through general obligation funds and bonded out with the overall Woodlawn project. The city engineer, Ann Stevens, is here to explain the agreement and answer any questions.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As the mayor indicated, this is for the construction engineering, otherwise known as construction observation services for the Woodlawn project. The MKEC will still be involved in the engineering portion if we do have any design-related questions. Their costs associated with their time was included in the earlier design phase that we already have a contract for. So there should be no additional costs coming from them. But the construction phase is very important that we do have a qualified engineer on site. This is also their, Eric Strecker, one of their construction observers, will be the main construction engineer, assuming or construction observer, assuming the timing works out for their schedule. Dakota Zimmerman with Garver will be the construction engineer of record, I believe, as he is a licensed engineer. So that's kind of how it works. They are on site pretty much every day, watching the contract, making sure everything is done according to KDOT specifications. If there's any questions that come up, they're the first point of contact. They help get those questions answered for the contractor.
Great. Any questions for Ann or
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith?
the not to exceed amount, $873,896. How does that compare to our original estimate for the services?
I do not have an answer for that because I did not look at that prior to coming to the meeting. I apologize for that. But as with everything else, I'm guessing it's probably over what we had originally estimated 3-4 years, because I think all this was estimated in about 2016. So construction costs of everything has gone up.
Are we also sharing the cost of this with Wichita,
No.
or do they have their own for their portion?
Ty, have we finalized any agreement? I don't believe we were going to share it with Wichita, but I believe we were going to share a portion of it with the county.
Yeah, I know we worked out a deal with Wichita for some mains that they had to move or something. So that should have already been done. But yes, we haven't worked out the specific details, but the initial discussion was to have a portion of Woodlawn is in the county still, and they want us to take it over, basically annex it. It's just the road portion is all it is. And so I suggested that we would do that if they would pay a portion of the road construction costs. And so we're negotiating what that cost is going to be, and then we'll throw in some of the engineering that'll be part of the road project. So yes, we will get some reimbursement back for Woodlawn. The bigger portion will be for the actual construction, but we'll include some of this. We originally kind of were talking about 10% is what they were saying. They'd pay 10% of the project. And so when we get all these dollar amounts, then we'll see if they're still comfortable with that number.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that.
And I guess I would mention that this is signing this document today does not 100% obligate us to the project, to the expenditure. We will still have the ability, once the bids come in tomorrow, to, if they're over what we want, we'll still have the opportunity to say, we need to shelve the project or whatever. did have some good news from a Wichita project that bid fairly recently, similar size. It came in about $1 million underneath the estimate. So
Good.
I'm hopeful.
Hopefully it happens. Timing really is bad on this because it should have been yesterday so we could talk about today, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
So, okay, great. Well, I look forward to the bid letting and finding out who it looks like will be the successful contractor and getting this project underway. That would be a fantastic thing to have done. So it's good.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
the only one other question that I had is I was looking at the work estimate form. The one thing that stood out to me was that the mileage for pickup was estimated at 46,000 miles and at 56 cents a mile. And I was curious how that just caught my eye as a really substantial number of miles to be estimating for, like construction observation on the project. And that's $25,000 of expense. It just caught my eye and I was interested in what drove that.
I can tell you the 56 cents a mile is the government rate for mileage.
Yeah, the rate
That's
made
what I
sense,
charge.
but the 46,000 of those miles is
Right.
what I wasn't sure how that could possibly be.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. What it comes down to is on the utility project, we had one person on site. On KDOT, you have one inspector full-time out there. You could have up to 3 other individuals out there doing material testing, stuff like that. So once you take that into consideration over a 1.5 to 2 year long project, adds up fairly quickly. So we did the estimate when we put the work estimate form together. We tied that together of, well, one guy full-time, second guy 2/3 of the time, third guy 1/3 of the time. I related that mileage from our office there. That also includes dropping off material that the contractor's using for the roadway and whatnot to the district labs, stuff like that. So there's a lot of the material testing behind the scenes. A lot of people don't see that goes on, and that is a big portion of the mileage carrying that out.
Okay, so all the miles driving to the construction site are part of what the city pays for.
City and KDOT, but in the whole estimate, that 46,000, that's mileage from our office to the project site. That's mileage round trip, and that's mileage for all the material of all the inspectors that'll be out there. So it may just show one pickup, but it could be 4 to 6 different pickups through the life of the project.
Yeah. Okay.
On the same day, so it adds up.
So I assume there's reporting on that's done routinely, right? On
The
mileage
reporting?
charge.
Yeah,
mileage
yeah.
charge
The invoice
routinely
comes in
reported.
just like the utility coordination. You'll see hours straight down there along with the mileage per day. So yeah, if you see 1,000 miles in a week from one person, it may sound a little fishy. So, but everything is gone through there and reported on a monthly basis, reviewed by KDOT and the city.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Garver or city engineer? I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Elsoff.
I motion to approve the Kansas Department of Transportation's work estimate form for the construction engineering services from Garver in the amount not to exceed $873,896.61.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Elsoff and a second by Dr. Schroeder. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Move on to item B. City Hall contains a community room. We all know that. And has been used for community purposes. So the room is available for rent by citizens of Bel Aire. Typically, those occur on weekends for parties, celebrations, etc. There's also have HOAs and other organizations that will utilize the senior center. Rental fees have been included in the fee resolution approved each year. Staff created a policy creating clear guidelines and expectations. Council reviewed the policy at our workshop on September 14th with suggested changes. Those have been incorporated and now come to the City Council for final approval. Are there any questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
we discussed this at length at our workshop, last week, and I saw the changes that were implemented. I thought they looked good. Appreciate those updates. I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the use of City Hall facilities policy as listed.
I'll second.
A motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Welch. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item C, so 53rd Street between Oliver and Woodlawn was constructed by Sedgwick County approximately 10 years ago. I thought it was longer than that, but okay. Utilizing a cold mix of asphalt. It was not engineered nor designed for long-term stability, but rather simply put a hard surface over gravel. Since that time, we've had 2 schools built along 53rd with buses and parents constantly using this stretch, as well as having 4 new housing projects being installed along this mile. As a result, the road has become very rough with patches solving very little. Council is considering issuing a bond to pay for the road to be constructed to the current standards. In order to get a close estimate on cost, the city needs to have an engineering and determine a design to come up with quantities. Our city engineer contacted Garver for the engineering cost, which is what being considered tonight. So Ann is here to discuss the proposal and answer any questions.
Thank you. So as the mayor said, 53rd Street is failing. There's just too much traffic going down it, too much heavy traffic. It's not just the construction traffic. It's the buses, it's the semis, it's the trash trucks, et cetera, that are continually using that road. And I'm going to try not to get into too much with the next item, but I'm going to have to. So they're all kind of tied in together. So at the workshop, we had discussed that redoing 53rd Street and reconstructing it. And a couple of workshops ago, we had discussed a bond issue. So the agreement with Garver is for the design of 53rd Street. That some of the items highlighted in the staff report include adjusting the roadway grade at Woodlawn to allow for a gentler slope. At this point, when we get a little bit of ice and our staff is not able to get out there and treat the road quickly, or before cars start using it, there's always a time delay there. We've had cars slide back down that portion of the road. They're not able to get up that piece to get actually turned onto Woodlawn. It will also adjust the location of the road, shifting it a little bit further shifting the center line a little bit further to the south. This will help better align the road specifically with the Woodlawn intersection, but it will also allow us to keep the north ditch of the road the same and will not impact the properties to the north. It will also include the reconstruction of the existing culvert pipes. Most of those are corrugated metal pipes that like to rust. We would put them back with concrete, so that's a much more longer lasting material. And you wouldn't have to come back and replace those pipes. Those are the biggest items. There are going to be 2 portions of right-of-way that we do need to, if we move forward with this, there are the 2 portions of right-of-way that we will need to acquire. One of which should be fairly easy. It is along the triangle piece of property that is at the hard corner of Woodlawn and 53rd Street. That is currently in the platting stages. The Planning Commission has accepted the rezoning of that property. However, they have not seen the plat, preliminary or final plat for that. So that's just a matter of discussing with the developer. And I've already had preliminary discussions with the engineer working on that process or on that project. And he said the developer would have no problems deeding that extra, I believe it's 30 feet of right of way to the city. The other piece is the portion of the home that is in the county that along that, just kind of in the 2/3 of the way between Woodlawn and Oliver. We need an extra 30 feet there just to make a continual, so there's no jog. And that would be extra cost for the city. I do not have an estimate on how much that would cost, but we'll be working with most likely Alan Skeens, who worked with us on all the Woodlawn project, to see if we can acquire that piece of property. But in order to do that, we need to have the design agreement with Garver so they can put together a meets and bounds and a specific survey, not only a map, but a description of the piece of property that we would need to obtain. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, we have both Ken Lee and Chris Bohm with Garver, and they're happy to answer questions as well.
What kind of time frame are we looking on to get this finished? The
That all
design.
depends on when the agreement would be approved, but there is a time schedule. I did ask for a time schedule to be put in the agreement. It would be on page 127 of your packet. Final plans for bidding would be approximately 110 days from the date of agreement that the agreement was signed. So if you signed it
4
tonight,
months.
yes, approximately 4 months. And then I believe Ken thought 3 to 4 months for construction. So it would be on into next year. And the hope would be to get it on the streets kind of the first of the year for a February approval from the council.
Mr. Mayor.
Dr. Schroeder.
So it's safe to say we're like super far behind. We're having major problems on this road, and even figuring out what to do is going to take a long time, right? I mean, I think we kind of know we're behind on road stuff, but this seems to be like a pretty painful one.
That is correct. I have been bringing this to council every year for the last several and just saying, hey, this is out there, but it's a matter of funding. You know, fortunately right now we have a low interest rate time, and so it's a good time to take out funding. In the next item, we did ask PP&J for a quote on repairing it, and all of the areas was about $65,000. So you have decisions to make.
Every time we repair it, it falls apart within just a few months. So,
It falls apart in another location.
Right.
The area that they repaired stays great, but unfortunately, it's usually right next to the location they repaired. And that
So-
it's a function of the material used in the initial paving of it.
It's just spending bad money chasing a problem that's not going to go away.
Correct.
Are those repairs lasting longer now that we start putting concrete underneath them?
Oh, yes. We have not had a problem with any of the repairs, to my knowledge, that we have used concrete with.
Okay, so it's the older repairs we're having trouble with.
It's not
And
necessarily.
the older pieces
Yeah,
of road
it's-
that haven't been fixed.
The older repairs we've actually fixed already with the concrete that after they failed again and again and again. This is just, so you repair here and right here it fails because the cars are coming down on that softer surface and tearing it up more.
Mr. Mayor, I have a couple questions.
Mr. Elsoff.
First question is, I guess I was surprised that we don't have multiple bids we're looking at for this. Could you explain why we just went with Garver right away on this one?
Mainly because we'd worked with them from the beginning on this project and just with a little bit of help. And then we also have a engineering, what do you call it? It's not a side agreement. It's a agreement for services with Garver, which is why we had chosen them. They've always done a very good job and been able to get with us very quickly and expedite projects for us.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Second question is, and it sounded like we have pretty high expectations that if we get the ball rolling on this by the start of the next school year, we could probably have 53rd done. Does that seems very doable?
Yes.
Okay.
Now I will put a caveat in there.
Mhm.
They did request that we do some geotechnical exploration. If you remember at Bristol Hollows, we had a whole bunch of fun over on that site. While we don't expect, you never know until you do, even with geotechnical explorations, there's no guarantee that you're not going to run into an interesting situation underground. But we're hopeful that with the procedures in place and the section of concrete, of pavement that we use, I'm not saying concrete, it could be asphalt, then we'll have a good roadway and hopefully we won't run into any issues.
Just make sure we go deep enough with those geotechnicals.
Yes.
Because, yeah, you're right. We've had some problems in that area, right? With water.
Yes.
Do we know what's on the north side of that berm about halfway down the road? That huge berm that's about where all the roads falling apart? I'm just wondering if it's holding water or something else that could be causing us a problem.
I believe the water drains north, so it doesn't drain to the south across 53rd. So I don't know that there's, I mean, the north, are you
Okay, but
talking?
if the soil's saturated at that point, then
Right. Yeah, we don't know much
that's
about the
a need
geotechnical
for
north.
doing
but-
the geo survey.
Correct. Yep. And both myself and Ken will work together on figuring out where we want to drill holes, but they would be in those low spots is where we would definitely.
Well, that's kind of a
Alcohol or
high
two,
spot there.
so.
I drove down there just this last week and saw that, and I wondered what they had built that up for.
So you're talking, I guess, where's,
I don't know. I should look on the.
is there, one of the property owners did put in some landscaping berms. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, Mr. Welch, or if there's,
I think it's right at the half-mile mark, but I can't, it's not on this picture. You can't tell it.
okay. Are those fairly new?
It's within 10 years.
Okay,
I know that because I was looking at property there 10 years ago, but,
gotcha.
and I haven't really paid attention until last week at what it looked like on both sides and down the road.
Gotcha. I think those are just landscaping berms. I don't think that there's anything really,
It's a
But
very
they're
high
holding back.
berm is why I'm asking. It's
right,
probably 20 foot above the road surface level. It may not be quite that much, but it seems like.
sure. I'm guessing that's just a landscaping berm because that property owner has, if it's the property owner that I'm thinking of, they've done quite a bit of landscaping work within the last couple of years.
Yeah, that was just an open field before, so I don't know. Maybe they don't like our developments on the south side of the road.
That's quite possible.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
this may be more of a question for Garber. I'm not sure, but one of the key drivers of timeline here, I think, for us is trying to get that opinion of cost so that we have an accurate number to make a determination on bonding. 60 days out, the difference in 30 days and 60 days from an interest rate perspective could be really substantial. It's possible nobody can predict the future, but the longer time goes on, in my opinion, more likely it is that interest rates may go back up. Is there anything that we can do to advance the timeline on the opinion of cost and pull that up in the schedule?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Chris Bohm from Garver. We have already done some preliminary costing on that stretch of road, working with Ann just to get an idea to quantify what kind of costs we're thinking about. We don't have the benefit yet of the geotechnical reports to see if there's anything in particular that needs to be done in that regard, nor have we inventoried all of the culvert pipes, although we counted all the culvert pipes in our estimate. So we have a fairly good working estimate. We can validate that even better after your bid letting for Woodlawn tomorrow, looking at some of the unit costs for the bigger parts of the materials that'll be used. So we will work with Ann soon, within a week after Woodlawn bids, to look at some of those costs and give her an updated construction cost estimate. It won't be perfect because we don't have a design yet, but it'll be pretty close, and it could be used for bonding purposes in our view.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just interject. I agree completely, and we can certainly for that level of costing, we can give you numbers sooner than 60 days. The 60 days is just when we'll actually have our full preliminary set of plans where we'll have a full quantity list of everything we're doing at that point is more the plan there. I did want to mention, as far as the timing and all that question came up. One of the things that we're going to recommend is completely shutting down like the eastern third of it, just to allow that to be constructed far more quickly. We talked with some contractors, and picking and choosing your battles on that can cut your construction time in half, where you're not dealing with trying to move traffic over and back and forth. So there's some things we're already looking at to try and accelerate it. But the question about timing to be done before school next year. Everything we're seeing, if we can get going on it pretty quickly, it'll be done by midsummer is our plan.
Mr. Mayor, from what I see, my overarching goal is to sell land, to have money to do road projects, and this is a important road project to do. 53rd's falling apart, and so I don't see a better path than going ahead and moving forward with this. So I'll go ahead and motion to approve the design agreement with Garver for 53rd Street reconstruction from Oliver to Woodlawn and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second.
A motion by Dr. Schroeder and second by Mr. Smith. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item D is consideration of closing 53rd Street between Oliver and Woodlawn. As mentioned in the previous action, 53rd Street between Oliver and Woodlawn has become very rough and too costly to repair. In order to reduce the amount of traffic and thereby repairs, the idea of closing this mile through traffic was discussed at our September workshop. Staff has come up with a plan closure until a permanent solution can be made, and is here to discuss a plan for the closure and can answer any questions. This is a significant safety concern, and I think it's important that we pursue with closing of this road. So that's.
So similar to when we have construction projects where we need to close the road, there would be barricades at both the Woodlawn end and the Oliver end stating road closed to through traffic. That would still allow access for the property owners that live along Woodlawn or along 53rd Street, as well as the construction traffic that needs to get down that road. Having the road closed to through traffic versus local traffic only is just a little bit of semantics, and the through traffic seems to be a little bit more understandable to the general public than local traffic. A lot of people don't understand what local traffic means. So that would be the basis of the closure. We would be working with most likely Sillicin, who is a local traffic control supplier for all the barricades and the traffic control, et cetera. And then it would be up to the police department to assist us in monitoring, just as they did on 53rd Street from Woodlawn to Rock. They sat out there and they caught quite a few people trying to go through the closure. So, and Miss Kelly could elaborate further on kind of what the closure means as far as traffic. If somebody is caught going through there and they don't live along that area or have reason to go to one of the properties.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
I did drive down this road 2 days ago, I think, and it is even worse than I remember last time I drove down it. It continues to get worse. It is a safety hazard. One thing that I did notice is that it appeared to me that most of the really significant issues were on either the left edge of the road or the right edge of the road. And I don't know why that is, but it felt like the giant craters that are causing the safety issues are on the edges of the road. And if you kind of swerve and go around it, you can avoid them as long as there's no oncoming traffic. And it made me wonder if there was an option to explore around just making that a one-way road and letting people drive down the middle until we're able to get it repaired, as opposed to fully closing it.
That is certainly possible. It's done with construction traffic all the time. It would just mean different signage. When we had 53rd Street from Rock to Webb, that was turned into gravel because of those same issues. There were large craters. I mean, they were 6 inches to a foot depth, and you did have to kind of slalom through that in order to get through it. And it's much easier on a gravel or on a paved road than a gravel road, especially when you're passing buses. But we did drop the speed limit down to 30 miles an hour to give drivers the time to see those craters coming up and get around them as they're able to.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good idea. It's just something that I was wondering about. I'd be interested in your opinion on that as an alternative.
It would certainly be possible. I would probably enlist some expert advice as to which direction would be better, because we're not going to be switching it in the middle of the day for school drop off and school pickup. That's not going to be possible. So it will, I just put that out there right now. That's not going to be done. I'm not sure which is easier for the school traffic. And that's pretty much the driver, since there's really not big businesses on either end other than the school. But would probably kind of take a look and see which way would be easier. But it's certainly doable. And Ms. Kelly, I know you've researched some of this more so than I have on the legalities and who's allowed to close stuff. So do you have an opinion on one way versus closure?
Not at all. It would just be a detour or alternative route, which the council is able to do during the construction period. So that would not necessarily, let me just read the motion. It would change the motion a little bit because you wouldn't be going from all traffic to all through traffic. You'd probably be adding in to certain traffic or an alternative route. Let me just think about that for a second, but it could be done legally and within the scope of the construction project you're working on right now.
And I would say it's probably going to be easier for our law enforcement department to enforce the one way versus either a closure to through traffic or all traffic, just since there's still a way through. I know they had a grand time of things when we had the other portion of 53rd Street closed.
Yeah, I'm a little, cause I don't know how I feel about that. It just seems a little bit to me that doesn't really accomplish the what we're trying to accomplish here. It just feels a little bit like, I mean, we wanted to close, we were suggesting closing it to local traffic or through traffic, but allow local traffic to use the road. That local traffic needs to go both directions, probably. I know Mr. Engler is here in the audience and he showed up late, so I may allow audience to participate in a little discussion here in just a minute because they didn't get a chance to do that. I don't know if anybody else is in the audience who lives along that road strip, but I would like to hear what one of the residents who lives there has to say, if you can. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I'd recommend soliciting a motion for a hearing on 53rd Street traffic. And since you're not required to announce or provide notice for the hearing, you could pass the motion for the hearing and have the hearing today. And that would allow a formal way for the public to speak at this meeting. So if you have a council member who would be willing to motion for a hearing at this time, that would work.
Thank you for that suggestion. Do we have a council member who would make that motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. I'll motion that we have open a public hearing for the discussion of the closing of 53rd Street.
I'll second that.
A motion by Mr. Elshoff and a second by Mr. Smith for a public hearing. Any discussion concerning a public hearing? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are open for public hearing. Any member of the public who would like to speak may come to the podium and tell us their thoughts.
Good evening, Jeff Englert. I live at 5140 East 53rd Street North, which is the first arrow on the north side of the street, just east of Oliver. I won't get too much into my thoughts on condition and the need for this. That's kind of already been established. I wasn't sure who brought the idea of one way. As a resident, I don't really like that. It's a pain, and I don't think it's actually going to cut down the traffic too much going through there. Certain times of the day it may. Myself and my family, we drive that probably 5 times a day. And there's a fair amount of traffic. Very little of that traffic going through there are residents or people going to any of the arrows you see there. It's people passing through between Oliver and Woodlawn. If you cut it down to no through traffic, just only local traffic, that'll cut the traffic down on that street. I'm guessing 80 to 90% because most of it is not. If you drive down there, it's rare that you actually have to stop with someone turning there. a little bit more with construction lately, but not nearly as much. And I know there's going to still people drive through. They're not supposed to. They're not going to be able to police it the entire time. And if you can just cut down the traffic going through there, the people that live there, we know where the potholes are. We know how to navigate it. We know what to do there. You're going to cut down the risk of an accident tremendously just by having it only to local traffic. The one way, I think you're going to still have high amounts of traffic going through there on the way to and from school with those the 3 to 4 schools that are right in that area there. So I'm a big proponent for closing down to only local traffic until it is repaired. I mean, I think we all know it needs to be repaired. I would say almost daily, I have someone driving on the other side, on the left lane when I'm going in the right lane. Haven't gotten an accident yet, but I mean, I've laid on my horn numerous times on people that are just going, I don't care if it says 30 on there, people are still going 50 down there. They treat it like a country road still. So yeah, it needs to be done. Close it to local traffic. I think that when I heard that during the workshop, I thought that was a great idea to get it done. Happy to answer any questions if anyone has anything about what goes on there.
All right. Any questions for Mr. England?
Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to speak from the public concerning this issue? Hearing none, I think we need to have a motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion from Dr. Schroeder to close the hearing. Any other?
Second.
Second from Mr. Smith. Any other discussion? Hearing none. Call for vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Public hearing is closed. Motion carries 5-0. Any other discussion concerning closing of 53rd Street?
Mr. Mayor, I won't make a motion. I let Councilman Elsoff speak as I think uses that road probably maybe more than any of us if he takes his kids or his wife takes his kid to Isley. I don't know. But my thoughts are similar to the gentleman who just spoke. Makes sense to cut down the traffic. I think the one-way idea was a really good idea worth thinking about. But if we have a pothole in the middle and then we have to change it and so on and so forth, we could change it. I don't know. It was certainly worth thinking about, but I tend to be in favor of just going ahead and doing the no through traffic, though. It's possible that was the better way to do it. I'm not super sure, but I'd imagine if you lived on one side and you were coming in from the other and you had to circle all the way around and you had to do that like every day, you'd like really hate that if you lived on that road. But it still might be an okay idea, but I tend to be kind of go with the cut it down to through traffic.
Thank you. Mr. Elsoff?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I do have a comment. I guess I'd just like to share. So, as most of you know, I've got 4 kids at Isley and Woodlawn there. And my family, we live just off of Oliver. So my wife takes the kids to Isley every day in the minivan. We don't use the bus system. We drive it. And her route is to go north on Oliver and go east on 53rd Street across the Woodlawn. So I've been talking with my wife about this, and obviously it inconveniences her to have the road closed. And in talking with her, she highlighted, well, can't people just if they just go the speed limit, it'd probably be okay. And I agree. I think if that were the case, it'd probably be okay. But nonetheless, I think the right thing to do is to close it. As a chronic speeder myself, I know what it's like hitting 53rd Street. It does feel like that open country road, and I get the same problem when I'm going north on Oliver into Keachai. You find yourself going way more than 30 miles an hour quite quickly, and those potholes get a little scary. So, yeah, the one-way option is an interesting option. I was interested to see what a resident had to say, so I appreciate that. I guess I lean towards doing the close the through traffic and closing it down as much as we can in the end. So I'm sure we'll get some upset parents from Isley and possibly the high school too. I get it. It's going to be an inconvenience, and you're going to have to find an alternative route. And I know that's going to be a pain, but it is a safety hazard, a major safety hazard at this point. I think everybody that drives it knows it. And yeah, those of us that do drive slower, it would probably be okay. But I think it just presents a safety hazard that we have to deal with. So if we're not going to spend the money to repair it in the short term before we reconstruct it, I think the right thing to do, the best thing to do, is to close it down to through traffic. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
I appreciate that we were able to have somebody who lives on the street, speak to this. I think that's helpful. As I was thinking about this, I think there's two different safety issues. One safety issue is, hitting a giant pothole and losing control of your vehicle or damaging your vehicle just by, hitting the pothole. And maybe the bigger safety issue is you're swerving to avoid a pothole, you're in the other lane, and then oncoming traffic, hits you. And so that's, maybe a bigger safety risk. And, one way certainly solves that risk point. But I can see how it would be, a real significant inconvenience for somebody who lived along there, and likely, a result of closing it to through traffic will reduce the traffic volume such that the likelihood of two cars, going down it at the same time and, running into the pothole area together is way less likely. So I think, at this point, I'm leaning towards the option of closing the road to through traffic. If we do that, it might be worth just kind of monitoring that traffic volume and seeing, how much traffic are we getting there? Because if it still is a lot of traffic, I still feel like there's going to be a high risk of oncoming traffic collisions as people are swerving to miss the potholes. But I'm not expecting that to be the case just based on what's been shared here tonight.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Welch?
Yeah, I said I drove down there last week and I was going east at about 30 and I came to an almost complete stop about half a mile in because there was a very large pothole and I about got rear-ended by one of these people we're talking about that does 50. They weren't even paying attention to me in front of them. So I'm all for the road closure to through traffic, but that does not mean that we can't still discuss doing some patchwork to get that back open until we can get to a total redo. So depending on our feelings on that, which we're not discussing at the moment, it might not be a 4-month closure or a 6-month closure. It might just be a few weeks or something.
It's an interesting perspective. And I did see that quote from PPJ. Would you mind coming and helping us understand what that was about? What your thought process was there?
We provided the quote so council has options. That quote is to repair all of the damaged locations on 53rd Street at this point. In years past, we usually do one set of repairs in the spring from winter damage, and we do another set of repairs in the fall from the damage over the summer from the heavy trucks. We have not done, to my recollection, any repairs yet this year because we've kind of been going back and forth trying to decide what to do. Now, I've slept numerous times since the spring, so if we did repairs this spring, you'll have to forgive me, but the $65,000 is for repairing everything that's there, and that would bring it up to a navigable road, and it would take approximately 4 days, and it would be closed to local traffic during that time.
Yeah, my feeling on that is it's more of the whack-a-mole type of thing, because you do that and then you're going to have them pop up other places. You're going to have the same old thing in just a few months. So, but that's my feeling.
Mr. Mayor,
have things to say. Mr. Smith.
What do we know? How long would it take to do the $65,000 worth of repairs? If we approved this quote tonight, how long would the road be, open before we would be, starting the construction in February of next year? I'm wondering, how many months of use does $62,000 buy us for that road?
They did not give me an estimate on when they believed they could get to it, but they did say approximately, as I said before, about 4 days. they're usually been pretty good to get to the closure or get to the repairs. So I would imagine within a couple of weeks. It certainly wouldn't. I certainly would not expect it to be a month plus. And if we do proceed with the closure, it will take me a couple days to be able to get the signage in place, the signage plan from Sillicin approved, as well as contacting the schools and making sure everybody that we can is informed of this closure. So it's not going to be something that's done tomorrow. There's a little bit of a preparatory work involved.
So hypothetically, if we moved forward with it, I'm just exploring the idea here. I'm not saying I support moving forward with it. We would, approve this quote, and then, best case, 2-3 weeks from now, those repairs are completed. And so we'd be mid-October, and we'd be able to likely use that road from mid-October until maybe February, when reconstruction would start. In February, we expect that the road will likely be closed to through traffic for that construction. Is that true?
That is correct.
Okay. So 4 months of usage, kind of best case scenario for that $65,000 is what we're looking at.
That is correct.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, sorry. I think it sounds like we're pretty sure not about the 65,000, but on the closure. So I'll go ahead and make that motion so we can, if we want to discuss more of that other, we can. But I'll make a motion to approve the closure of 53rd Street between Oliver and Woodlawn to all through traffic for the duration of the planning and execution of the maintenance work to improve safety of the road surface. Such road closures shall be effective upon the placement of the first sign identifying the road closure zone.
I'll second.
I have a motion from Dr. Schroeder and a second from Mr. Welch. Any more discussion concerning the road closure? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll close 53rd for all through traffic from 53rd from Oliver to Woodlawn as soon as it can be implemented by city staff.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr.
do we need to add a new item then to tonight's actions to discuss possibly having PP&J repair 53rd Street?
If we want to have that discussion, we can talk about adding an agenda item. Yes.
You need a motion for an additional agenda item?
You would, yes.
I'm not sure how to state that.
You can just motion to add another item to the agenda concerning, I think.
Road repairs.
Road repairs, yes, and maybe specifically PP&J's estimated bid for those repairs.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to add an agenda item to discuss temporary repairs to 53rd Street between Oliver and Woodlawn.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Welch and a second by Mr. Smith to add an agenda item for consideration of repairs on 53rd between Oliver and Woodlawn. Any discussion concerning this motion? And it's an agenda item motion. It's not a motion to do anything, right?
Right.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0. That it will be agenda item E, as in Eddie. And so we'll move on to the motion, agenda item E, to discuss consideration of repairs of 53rd between Oliver and Woodlawn.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Welch.
One of the things I've looked at is the actual costs of this and what we're spending per year. And $60,000 is approximately the interest we would pay on 1 year's $2 million note at 3%. So if we could get anywhere near 6 months out of it before we tore it up, I'm not sure that that's not a bad purchase. It's not cheap, but it's better than having it closed for 6 months, I think.
I guess I have a question, Mr. Mayor. I guess this is for you, Ann. Of all the identified repair areas, do we have other areas that are I guess, deemed vulnerable to creating those craters or those damaged areas in addition to what we already have if we go do these repairs?
The repairs that were identified in blues, that should pretty well capture all of the areas. I'm not aware of any that are on the borderline that are not captured in the drawing with the blue areas. So they would all be addressed with the repairs. Now, going through the winter period with the freeze thaw action, as well as the heavy trucks and heavy vehicles going over, that generally we see more repairs needed in the springtime. So it will take care of everything that is there now, but that's not to say that there's not some going to be cropping up over this winter that would need to be repaired in the spring.
I guess for me, this just comes down to money and whether or not it's worth the cost right now to do it. I guess I'm kind of not sure. Mr. Welch made a good argument for it. That's good. That's helping me work through that. If I recall, that seems like that's probably the most we would have spent in one fell swoop on 53rd. I remember it typically being about 30 to 40 in the past. Is that right?
From my recollection, yes. I don't believe that we've ever spent 60 to 65,000 in one swoop. It's, as I said, it's usually divided into kind of spring and fall.
Right.
Could we get bids in before the next council meeting? Do you think if we put this out to more than one company, maybe
Yes.
get a better price?
We can put it out. There's been the last several times we've done this, we've only gotten two prices. One was from PP&J, the other's from Kansas Paving. We can certainly put it out to Kansas Paving. I hesitate, if council wishes, I can certainly do that. I hesitate since PP&J's number is now public. Anybody else that wants the job can come in and undercut them.
And it seems like Kansas Paving has been higher usually.
That is correct.
I hate to say that, but
Yeah, I don't think it's fair business practice to publish a bid and then go out for competitive bids.
yeah, I'd forgotten that they already had put that thought together.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
I think the other thing there is, delaying this just delays the useful life of the repairs that we would do. It's possible that those repairs would be either started or completed by the time we would meet at the next council meeting if we decided on this tonight, it sounds like. And we're talking about a pretty short useful life, I think, for these repairs, because I do believe we'll move pretty aggressively on the rebuild of 53rd Street. And so I think it really comes down to, if our expected useful life of these repairs is 4 months, is it worth $65,000 to have that road open for 4 months or not? And calculating that, it sounds like there's a lot of traffic on it, and it's going to be a pretty big public nuisance to have this road closed. I guess I'm kind of lightly leaning towards moving forward with the repairs, but it is a really big expense.
Let me throw one more thing out. There's no guarantee we'll get started on the replacement in February. Remember, Baton was held back like 3 or 4 months because of weather conditions. So we may have a longer period of time before we can get this started on it. Are we thinking concrete or asphalt on 53rd?
I don't really have a preference. Well, I do have a preference. I prefer concrete, but more than likely we'll bid out both.
Well, I'm just thinking that if we did asphalt, we'd have to wait for the asphalt plants to open in the spring, right?
That is correct.
So that would definitely give us a longer period before we could repair it.
That's true.
Mr.
They'll probably open like March timeframe though. Is that right?
It's
March, April timeframe?
usually end of March, early April, sometimes mid-April, depending on the weather. The
Right,
Farmer's
right.
Almanac says we're going to get a really cold one this year.
So,
I can't predict the weather.
no.
Mr. Mayor, I feel like there's just a lot of uncertainty. I think Councilman Welch is right that there's no certainty we'll start on time. I also have no certainty that this road will be safe in the spring. I think it could very well. We'll spend the money. The project might start late, but the road will be undrivable again by the time the spring comes, dangerous again. So there's just a lot of guessing that we're going to do. And in this particular case, with sort of the guessing, I tend to be a little more shaky on throwing money at something that I'm not sure. I think Councilman Welch was right. Let's say we spend that 63,000. It's solid. The thing gets delayed. We get to use the road the whole time. I think that'd be money well spent, probably, if that were the case. He's right there, but kind of the uncertainty of knowing whether that road's even going to stay together if it does get pushed back. I am kind of leaning a little bit more towards and not spending that money.
I think history tells us it's not going to last. I think the history tells us that every time we patch this road, 3 to 4 months later, we have these problems again, and we go back and patch them again. It's like Ann said, it's a spring and a summer thing. We got to go fix it in the spring. We got to go fix it in the fall, or whichever way it works. But it's twice a year. We got to go throw some money at this road, and I think that's exactly what we're going to end up with here. If any delay in getting a reconstruction done, you're going to have a bad road again before you get to that road.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question for our city manager. So in terms of money, this would presumably came out of capital improvements to pay for this repair?
Yeah. So, we'd have to look at our funding for capital improvements. As we talked about, I think at the workshop, we were going to spend about $120,000 for a study on 254. The council allotted that. That's only going to cost us about $10,000 because all of the entities along 254 are sharing in that cost. But we're going to pay $95,000 roughly to Garver to actually engineer 53rd. So that money is now gone. Now we'll have to look at what our other projects have come in at bid wise, what we've got left to do. Long story short, we could come up with the money. I don't see a problem with that. Will you have to look at, what we've got left to do this year? Maybe prioritize. Does it go to 53rd instead of something else? Maybe. Ted and I'll just have to look at those numbers to see what that decision is going to be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion concerning potentially patching 53rd? Not, I'll entertain a motion.
What kind of motion do you want?
However you want to make it. It's either we move forward with this proposal from PB&J, or we deny this proposal.
Well, we weren't actually discussing the proposal. We were discussing maintenance to 53rd was what the agenda item was.
True.
And, I kind of was headed towards going ahead and doing the repairs, but since we've got the road closed and the one resident we've heard from thinks that's a good idea, I'm okay if we don't do the repairs. But it's going to be a guaranteed 6 months before anybody drives through there.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just kind of leaning towards, having a main street in Bel Aire closed for 6 months. It feels kind of unacceptable to me. And I know that, if we do these repairs come this spring, it's going to need more repairs. It does every single year, and it's going to be in different spots because the repairs that we do won't last. I was looking for, I know in our report we have the 2021 capital expenditure report. I was pulling that up to just look at the current status of where we were at. And, as of our report today, we show 472,000 under in our capital improvement. And I know we've got projects planned for that street evaluation, GIS at 125,000, the 47th Street reconstruction, which I know is, a really important priority, totaling 400,000 in that capital improvement. There's still 72,000, it looks like, in that capital improvement. So I'm not worried about it from do we have funds available in the capital improvement plan perspective. I kind of think we should do this, and not have one of our main streets closed for likely 6 months. I'm interested in the opinions of a couple of the council members we haven't heard from.
I want to address one thing you said is that the repairs aren't lasting. I believe Ann said that the places that we've repaired recently are not re-breaking. It's the places that have not been repaired. So if we continued down this path for 10 years, we'd have really good sides.
Yeah, no, I apologize if I misspoke. I did not intend to insinuate that the repairs are not lasting. I was attempting to communicate that new places that haven't previously been repaired will likely be problematic.
Right. Agreed.
You'd like an opinion
I'd
from
like,
me?
sure, like to hear from all the opinions of all the council members.
you
Be
know,
fine.
53rd Street for me is going into another world, okay? Because, I live the south end of Bel Aire, and when I moved there were no roads to my house. But now there are wonderful roads to my house, and I can get out 3 or 4 different ways. And, I've got all kinds of good things. So I'm just kind of unaware of this particular area and the number of people that it's affecting and that kind of thing. So it's hard for me. And roads are always expensive. I don't care whether you're doing them poorly or doing them well. They're expensive. So, I'm kind of ambivalent. I know it probably needs to be done, but I can't tell you the last time I even drove past that road, let alone drove down it or around it or anything else. So I don't feel very knowledgeable. I'm not hearing somebody going, yeah, we need to do this and we need to do it now. That kind of thing.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I guess I do have just a follow-up thought. So, I think Mr. Smith added some additional context and information. And I think it was Councilman Schroeder that mentioned it would be about, if we closed it right now and did nothing but kept it closed, it would be about 6 months before people drive on it. But I think it'll actually be a lot longer than that, probably. It probably wouldn't be until the construction's complete, which sounds closer to 9 months, possibly. And with the uncertainties, I think I could support doing this. I think, particularly since we don't have a budgetary reason that prevents us from doing it, that we've got some wiggle room, we can kind of reprioritize this for capital improvement. It's a vital artery for our city, and if we can shrink 9 months closure down to 3 months or something, if we can buy us a large chunk of that, probably more than half of that time, I think it may be worth it to pursue these repairs. So I think I could support that. I don't know if anyone else has any additional comments.
Mr. Mayor,
Smith?
Question for our city attorney. Can I make a motion to take action on the quote from PP&J on our current agenda item?
Yes, this PP&J quote falls within the scope of the topic you're talking about. So you can make a motion to take action on it. I was just talking to the city manager, and we were talking about it seems like you guys are wrestling with the uncertainty of the start date. So as one of the items you're working through, but he suggested possibly having that contingency in your motion contingent on a start date of no later than, and I would really get advice from the city engineer on the latest possible start date that could still allow for the repairs to be useful before the other project starts.
When will they close the asphalt plants this fall? Do we have a month or two, or?
So starting with the first question, I do not have an exact start date, because I said previously, I would imagine it would be within 2 weeks. As far as the second question on the asphalt plants, we should close those when the temperature starts getting 40 degrees.
For the high.
Thank you. Okay, so first question, now that my mic's on. First question is, the PB&J would likely get started within 2 to 3 weeks. Second question was, asphalt plants usually close when the temperature gets to about 40 degrees and below.
The daytime high or for the
For-
nighttime?
Usually for the daytime high.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
I'm going to make a motion to accept the contract from PPJ at a cost not to exceed $65,500, contingent on construction starting no later than October 8th. And if the construction isn't going to start before then, bringing this back to council, I think would make sense. My only other comment there is potentially that $3,500 could be revisited if some of the traffic control is already in place from the road closure. And so not to exceed was part of my motion there.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Elsa. Any additional discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Welch.
Will we know from PP&J that they'll be able to start by the 8th, since that's after our next council meeting?
I will make a phone call in the morning and figure out their approximate start date.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Schroeder.
I still am going to go ahead and vote against it, but this is one of those things that to hindsight will make somebody look smart and somebody look foolish, and I'm not sure which of us it's going to be. So I guess we'll see.
Any other discussion?
Would you reread the motion, please?
Okay, I'll try. The motion is to accept the PP&J contract not to exceed $65,500 with a start date no later than October 8th by Mr. Smith and seconded by Mr. Elsoff. Thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Aye.
I think I heard 4-1 with Dr. Schroeder voting in the negative. Is that correct? Okay. Motion carries 4-1. Moving on to item 7, I have no need for an executive session. Does anyone else have a need for an executive session? Seeing none, move on to item 13, discussion of future issues. Does anyone have anything they would like to discuss for future consideration?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
Just a follow-up item on our city attorney's report regarding the ballot initiatives. In our workshop, we did discuss drafting a letter to our state legislators from the council. I still would like to see us move forward with that if we could get that on our next agenda.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hearing no other issues, I'll move on to item 14, adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Mayor, I'll motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion from Dr. Schroeder and a second from Mr. Welch. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. We will see you on October 2nd.